Picture this. A young man crouches behind a cluster of thorn bushes on the grasslands of what is now Kazakhstan, roughly 5,500 years ago. His heart is hammering. In front of him stands a wild horse, muscular, wary, utterly untamed. Every instinct in that horse says run. Every instinct in that man says don't let it. What happens in the next 60 seconds will quietly reshape the future of the entire human species, and almost nobody alive today has ever been taught it in school. We love talking about fire. We love talking about the wheel. But almost nobody talks about the single greatest speed upgrade in human history. The day we stopped walking everywhere and started riding. Before that day, a human being's world was small, painfully small. If you were born in a valley, you probably died within a few dozen miles of that valley. News traveled at the speed of a human footstep, about 3 miles an hour. And that's if the terrain was flat and you weren't carrying a child, a spear, or a sack of grain. Trade was a slow, generational whisper game. An idea, a tool. A piece of jewelry might take 100 years to travel 1,000 miles, passed hand to hand between tribes who never met each other. Then someone looked at an animal not as food, not as a threat, but as a partner. And everything sped up. Here's the part almost nobody knows. Humans did not tame the horse first. We're taught to imagine some heroic caveman leaping onto a wild Mustang's back like a movie stunt. The real story is far stranger and far more human. Genetic and archaeological research increasingly suggests our real first ride. Species may have actually been smaller, calmer animals, possibly reindeer in the far north, or even certain breeds of wild cattle and donkeys in the Middle East, long before horses were ever considered rideable. Riding wasn't a single lightning bolt invention. It was a slow, messy, trial-and-error relationship that unfolded over centuries, region by region, herd by herd. And it was terrifying. Imagine being the very first person to try it. No saddle, no stirrups. Those wouldn't be invented for thousands more years. No bit, no bridle, nothing but rope, sweat, and raw nerve. You are climbing onto the back of a creature that could snap your spine with one buck, one panic, one wrong move. There was no tutorial. No elder who'd done it before. You were improvising against 400 kilograms of muscle and fear. Why would anyone even try this? Psychologists who study risk-taking in ancient and modern humans point to a simple truth. Desperation and curiosity are twins. A community facing drought, hunger, or a rival tribe encroaching on hunting grounds doesn't have the luxury of maybe later. Somebody, somewhere, was hungry enough, curious enough, or brave enough to test the impossible. That person had no idea they were about to become one of the most consequential, unnamed figures in human history. Here's a fact that should stop you in your tracks. Archaeologists studying ancient horse teeth in Kazakhstan found telltale wear patterns, the kind of damage caused specifically by a rope or leather, bit pressing against the mouth. Not from farming, not from pulling carts, from riding. That evidence alone pushed back our timeline of horseback, riding by potentially over 1,000 years, earlier than previously believed. Think about what that means. While ancient Egyptians were still perfecting the pyramids using pure human labor, someone on the steppes of Central Asia may have already been galloping across open plains, faster than any human had ever moved in the entire history of our species. Speed is power. Speed is survival. And once one tribe had it and another didn't, the balance of the ancient world tilted forever. This is where our story really begins. Not with triumph, but with fear, desperation, and one impossibly brave decision that changed the trajectory of civilization itself. So how do scientists actually know any of this? There's no ancient camera, no cave painting captioned "First Successful Ride Tuesday." Instead, researchers had to become detectives, piecing together clues from bones, teeth, dung, and DNA. The biggest breakthrough came from an unlikely place. Horse teeth and jawbones excavated from Botai culture sites in northern Kazakhstan. Scientists noticed unusual wear patterns on the premolars, consistent with the friction caused by a bit. They cross-referenced this with subtle changes in leg bones that suggested regular, sustained weight-bearing activity, the kind you'd see from an animal being ridden rather than simply herded on foot. Then came the real smoking gun. Pottery fragments from the same sites tested, positive for residues of fermented mare's milk, meaning these ancient people weren't just riding horses. They were actively managing herds closely enough to milk them. That's not casual contact. That's domestication. More recent genetic research has added another twist. A massive ancient DNA study analyzing horse genomes across Eurasia traced the origins of nearly all modern domesticated horses to a single population that exploded in size and spread rapidly around 200 years ago from the western Eurasian steppes. What's fascinating is that earlier horse taming cultures, like the Botai, actually left little genetic trace in modern horses, meaning multiple independent groups may have experimented with riding and taming before one lineage, eventually won and spread across the entire ancient world. This is where human psychology enters the picture in a fascinating way. Domesticating an animal that could kill you requires an enormous leap of trust in both directions. Modern behavioral scientists studying human animal bonding note that trust-based domestication likely happened gradually across generations, not with one adult ambushing a wild adult horse. The most probable pathway, foals raised from birth around human settlements, imprinting on human scent, human voice, human rhythm. A baby horse raised alongside children, dogs, and daily human noise doesn't see people as predators. It sees them as herd. That single psychological hack, raise it young, and it will trust you as family, is the same principle still used by every horse trainer, elephant caretaker, and dog breeder on Earth today. And the ripple effects were staggering. Once a group of humans could ride, they could suddenly cover 50 to 80 miles a day instead of 15 to 20 on foot, hunt herds of game that would have easily outrun a human sprinter, transport goods across regions previously considered too far to trade with, and wage war with a devastating new advantage. A mounted warrior could outmaneuver, outrun, and overpower foot soldiers with terrifying ease. Historians increasingly credit horseback riding as a key ingredient in the explosive spread of Indo-European languages across Europe and Asia. Entire linguistic families, the ancestors of English, Hindi, Persian, Russian, and dozens more, may have spread not through peaceful trade alone, but partly on horseback, carried by mobile herding cultures, who could simply move faster and farther than anyone else on the planet. Consider the sheer audacity of what happened next in human history because of this one innovation. Chariots reshaping ancient warfare in Egypt and Mesopotamia, the Mongol cavalry later conquering the largest contiguous land empire ever recorded, and postal and messenger systems across ancient empires functioning at the speed of a horse for literally thousands of years. Afterward, a speed limit on human communication that didn't meaningfully change until the invention of the steam engine. One anxious, untested decision on a windswept steppe didn't just create a new mode of transport. It rewired the clock speed of human civilization itself. Here's the surprising truth hiding underneath this entire story. Every major leap in human speed since that first ride on the steppe follows the exact same emotional pattern: fear, curiosity, a desperate few who try the impossible thing anyway. Then, decades or centuries later, the rest of the world treats it as normal. Think about it. The person who first climbed onto a wild animal's back felt the same cocktail of terror and adrenaline as the Wright brothers, strapping themselves into a flying machine made of wood and cloth. The same as the first engineers who sat inside a car with no seatbelt, no airbags, and brakes nobody had fully tested. The same as the first astronauts who agreed to be strapped to a controlled explosion and shot into space. Different centuries, different technology, identical human courage. That's the emotional through line modern psychologists point to when they study innovation. Breakthroughs rarely come from comfort. They come from someone tolerating unbearable uncertainty, just a little longer than everyone else around them. The steppe rider who first stayed on a bucking, terrified horse instead of letting go wasn't reckless. They were doing what every inventor, explorer, and founder has done since, absorbing risk so their community wouldn't have to. And here's where it connects to your life right now, watching this video on a screen that fits in your pocket. The device you're using descends, indirectly but genuinely, from that same chain of human decisions to move faster, connect farther, and trust the untested. Horses gave humanity its first taste of compressing distance. Ships, trains, cars, planes, and eventually the internet are simply that same instinct. Generation after generation, refusing to accept the limits of how far a body can walk in a day. There's also a humbling lesson buried in the science here. We still don't fully know who did it first, where exactly, or what tribe deserves the credit. No name survives. No monument was built. The person who arguably helped accelerate human civilization more than almost anyone in history is completely anonymous, lost entirely to time. It's a quiet reminder that history isn't just made by kings, pharaohs, and generals whose names get carved into stone. It's made by nameless, ordinary people making one terrifying decision that nobody else was brave enough to make yet. Modern researchers are still actively rewriting this story too. New ancient DNA techniques, refined bone wear analysis, and re-examined archaeological sites are pushing the possible timeline of horseback, riding earlier and earlier with each passing year. What we know today about the first riders may already be outdated within the next decade. which is honestly one of the most exciting parts of studying prehistoric science. The story is still being written, right now, by researchers currently in the field. So next time you're stuck in traffic, boarding a flight, or scrolling a video that reached you in milliseconds from across the planet, remember it all traces back to a terrified human being, alone, staring down an animal that could kill them, choosing to try anyway. That single moment of courage on an empty grassland didn't just create transportation. It created the entire momentum of human progress. If this story of humanity's first ride blew your mind, imagine what other firsts are still hiding in the fossil record, waiting to rewrite what we think we know. Subscribe, because we're going back in time again very soon. And trust me, it only gets wilder from here.